Okay, I think I'm going to kick it off. It's almost 1:30 for the webcast. I'm Warren Ackerman, the head of European Consumer at Barclays. Delighted to introduce Unilever to Boston. We will be having on stage Nitin Paranjpe. I hope I pronounced that almost correctly. He's the new Chief Operating Officer of Unilever. He started that job in May. I think I'm right in thinking Harish Manwani was the last COO a few years ago. And before that, Nitin did a great job as head of home care, and before that, CEO of Hindustan Unilever. So delighted to have Unilever here. Nitin, it's almost 1:30, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Warren, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here today amongst all of you. Warren's just given you a bit of a background about me. I have been with Unilever for 30 years, a little more than 30 years actually. And over this period, I've done a variety of jobs. My last few jobs have been in the division, where, as Warren said, I was leading the home care category for a period of 4 years. And then I was doing bringing the foods and refreshment divisions together as we moved to Rotterdam for a period of a little more than a year. Prior to that, I ran the Indian business and ran the South Asian business for a period of 5 years. Needless to say, I'm absolutely delighted with the new role that I've undertaken from the 1st of May this year. Now, before I begin, let me draw your attention to the Safe Harbor statement and any forward-looking statements and non-GAAP measures that we've got. Now, let me first start off by giving you a quick look at Unilever. A lot of the facts about Unilever would be widely known to you, but some of them still bear reiteration. The reality is that Unilever is possibly one of the most international companies, having a presence in over 190 countries. Almost 60% of our business comes from emerging markets. We have a wonderful portfolio of brands, both global brands as well as local brands. Brands like Magnum, brands like Dove, but also local jewels like Bango in Indonesia, or Marmite in the UK, or Robertson's in South Africa, Suave, Breyers in the US. It is this combination of brands which means that we occupy leading positions in over 85% of the country category cells that we operate in, which is number 1 or number 2 positions in each one of those. It's also this portfolio of brands which means that in the Kantar study for the top 50 global brands, 13 Unilever brands feature in that. The next competitor has only 6. In the same study, which has been going on for 4 years, I think from 2013, actually longer, there are only 4 brands which have consistently increased consumer reach points. 2 out of those 4 brands happen to be Unilever's. This combination of brands has meant that every single day, there are 2.5 billion people who use a Unilever product. Now, in addition to this, what I wanted to say was on the 1st of January this year, Alan Jobe took over as the CEO. And one of the first things that he did was to reiterate the criticality of purpose and centrality of that in the totality of our business. That's when we called out our purpose-led and future-fit strategy. This was based on the belief that purpose will drive performance. But in addition to performance, purpose has many other benefits, not least of which is in attracting the right people to work for your organization. There is plenty of evidence which shows that young people, millennials, are particularly looking to join organizations which have a role beyond making money and do something for the society in which they're operating in. We are delighted to share with you that in 50 out of the 54 countries where we measure our scores, we are the number 1 employer amongst the FMCG companies. Now, in addition to his announcement on the 1st of January on the criticality of purpose, Alan announced that we would have a Chief Operating Officer on the 1st of May. Now, in doing so, his objective was clear. He said that the purpose of this was to make sure that we provide clear focus and clear accountability for in-year performance, to make this organization sharp and more responsive to the changes that are taking place. Now, since then, we have flattened and delayered the organization, removing 2 clusters which we had, the European cluster and the Southeast Asian cluster. And that really means that there are more countries and markets which report directly into me. Now, it should not be a surprise to any of you that the mandate for this job was clear. And that mandate was to step up growth. Step up growth while delivering on the divisional strategies that we have called out before. Now, delivering this through our top team. And the top team that I've got, we call it the 4G Squad. A pretty unusual name for the top team which exists anywhere. And the choice of this top team name was taken quite deliberately. It was taken to reflect what we choose to do and how we go about doing it. The what is clear. Our responsibility is to deliver growth which meets the 4G criteria, which is growth which is consistent, growth which is competitive, growth which is profitable, and growth which is responsible or purposeful. The squad simply reflects how we wish to work in smaller groups, addressing issues in an agile sort of manner. The picture on the right is this 4G squad that you've got. Now, I've always believed that it is in the markets where we either win or lose. The markets are the microcosm of Unilever. That's where all our functions and all our divisions come together. And the role of the general manager is to bring all of this to deliver offerings and services to win with consumers in that market. That's why the general managers are in the center of that squad. Everyone else in the team, all the functions, whether it's HR, finance, supply chain, me, all of us are in service of those markets. Our job is simply to help them accelerate growth, serve the consumers, and win in the marketplace. That's really the intention that we've got. Now, I also said right at the beginning that our job was to deliver growth consistent with the divisional strategies. What you see on this chart should not be a surprise. We've called out these divisional strategies a few years ago, and they have remained unchanged. Each division has a very differentiated role. And in consistent with that role, it has a strategy which recognizes the unique challenges and opportunities that it has, and a strategy which will enable it to compete effectively with the very focused competitors that it has. So in beauty and personal care, our job is to accelerate innovation through global brands and local brands, leverage the acquisitions that we've got, launch new brands, but to step up growth. In home care, the job is to sustain growth while continuing the smart step up in margins that we've seen in recent years. And with food and refreshment, the coming together has created a lean business. The primary job in that division is to make sure that we shift this business to segments of faster growth, channels of faster growth, so that the portfolio transformation steps up the growth rate of this division. Those then are the roles that are there. Now, how are we going to go about ensuring that we deliver on these roles? And the approach that we've taken is that of a cell-based approach. Now, what do I mean by a cell-based approach? What I really mean is that we think of a cell as a market category combination, a country category combination. So think of it as laundry in Thailand is a cell, dressings in the United States is a cell, hair in Brazil is a cell. So those are cells. Now, we've classified the world into these cells. As a leader, I have visibility at the center to 165 cells. These 165 cells account for 70% of the turnover of the company. What's unique about these is each of these cells has been assigned a role which is one of the 4 roles that you see there. 3 out of those 4 cell roles are related to growth. They're about either accelerating growth, sustaining growth, or turning around the business, while the 4th role relates to an unlock in margins. Now, the 165 cells, like I said, account for 70% of our business. And today, I have the opportunity to have both visibility of the financial and non-financial parameters of these cells in order to intervene as required. Let me try and bring this to life with just a few examples. Over the last 2 weeks, I've had conversations with 2 different general managers. In one particular case, it was a turnaround cell, and it was evident that the changes in competitive context that we had seen meant that our plans needed to change. Some of that would have meant significantly more resources required if that cell had to deliver on its role of turning that business around. That required us to dynamically move resources to the cell to enable that cell to perform its role. The second example is quite different. The role was actually of a margin unlock. And I think on looking at those plans, it became very clear that the plans that we had were inconsistent with the role that had been assigned for that cell. And that's, again, an intervention required to drive consistency between the strategic role of the cell as defined by the division and the plans that we are implementing in the market. These are some of the actions which will help us ensure the strategic coherence of the strategy that we've called out for the division. But in addition to this, I said that our job was to step up growth. For stepping up growth, there are 4 levers that we want to drive. Again, this should not be a surprise to you. These relate to geography, channels, high growth segments, and purpose. I want to begin with geography. Yeah? Now, everyone knows that Unilever has a very high emerging market footprint. Now, 60% or so of our business comes from there. We have 4 powerhouses in India, Brazil, China, and in Indonesia. These 4 countries account for almost 25% of the Unilever business. But the real strength of Unilever in the emerging markets is not about these 4 countries. I'd like you to focus on the graph on the right. That reflects 38 of our emerging markets. 38 markets, each of which has a turnover in excess of 100 million. In fact, 16 of those markets have a turnover in excess of 500 million. This is really important because while we all understand that emerging markets will offer long-term secular growth, we also understand that the journey is often choppy. There is volatility involved. And the breadth of presence that we've got across emerging markets not only allows us to benefit from the longer-term growth that they will have, but in a somewhat de-risked manner because of what you see out here. Now, we often talk about the 4 key markets, but there are several markets which are the next strong markets which will power growth for us in the coming decade. Markets like Vietnam, markets like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, or even Ethiopia, small today, but can be very sizable and contribute to growth into the future. It is this that makes a difference and positions us well over the long term. Now, people have often asked as what has led to this position that you find yourself in. Much of it is because Unilever has gone there early. We've been around for almost 100 years in several of these markets. But there have been lessons that we've been taught over this period, which I thought I would like to share with you. These lessons have been critical to our success. The first and possibly the most significant and most important one is the long-term belief in the potential of this market and the commitment to stay the course. The commitment to stay the course is important because I said that the journey is not smooth and you have to ride and go through choppy times. Most organizations don't manage to do that. We all understand the long-term macros, that when there is population growth and increase in living standards, we will see growth, but that growth is uneven. Now, take a case of India. India, which is today a jewel in Unilever's crown. But it wasn't always the case. The journey wasn't smooth. And therefore, I thought I'd share with you a story of a country which I know a little bit about. There were periods in India when Unilever had been around, when it wasn't easy for business to conduct itself. Government policies and regulations made it difficult for any business, let alone multinationals, to operate there. There was a period in the late 70s when conditions were so difficult that there were a few multinationals which existed there, were around, were simply found it unfathomable and found it difficult to continue there. They vacated the country and left the country at that moment. Even through those difficult times, Unilever in India had deep belief and conviction in the long-term potential, worked its way to serve the needs of the country, align itself to the national interest, and over a period of time has emerged super successful. The story of India is played out in several other emerging markets where we find ourselves in this position. That's the long-term commitment that we need. But in addition to the long-term commitment, you also need And Unilever recognized early on that to understand these markets, the unique needs, the cultures, you needed local talent. That's why we invested in building local talent. Today, over 90% of our people in the countries come from their local markets. Most of the general managers that we have are local. But for this local talent and the expertise that comes with this local talent, I don't think we could have ever managed and dealt with the several crises that we've had in a country like Argentina and come out always stronger at the end of the crisis than when we went into it. The third aspect which is required to succeed out there is a brand portfolio. A brand portfolio which recognizes that the income disparity between the haves and have-nots in these countries is massive. There are people just coming into the consuming class while there are others who can afford products no different from what people in the West do. That's why you need a portfolio which straddles the price pyramid. In India, you have the ability to offer a single-use shampoo sachets which cost 25 cents. And at the same time have the opportunity to market products like Pond's Radiance Night Cream, which could cost you more than $15 for a small jar. That opportunity enables us to address the needs, or that portfolio enables us to address the needs of all people in this market. The fourth point is around market development. Our presence in these markets today is often a result of Unilever doing things to create markets, to shape habits, and to drive behavior change out here. That has come about through a very codified model that we've got. Starting off with an insight, moving it into a proposition, designing a product, driving education, driving sampling and trial. There is a way of doing this and a way of doing this economically to create markets. The best example I can think of at this moment is how we've created the conditioner market in Philippines. Creme Silk, a brand that we've got there, single-handedly over the years has created this category which now has a penetration of over 80% with that one simple insight, that shampoo alone is inadequate. We've done this market after market, and a codified approach has helped us. Deep distribution, again, needs a very little saying. In many of these markets, access makes a massive difference. Distribution in many of these places goes beyond access. It often drives demand generation and often drives brand building. And that's the role that we've played with deep distribution in this market. And last but not the least, the recognition that you can't stay still. While we may have an edge and we have started off and have had a leadership position out here, others are catching up. And therefore, constantly working to improve your capabilities and portfolio has been crucial. I want to share with you one example of what we are doing just now to ensure that the significant advantage which we have in our distribution system in these markets is maintained. And that relates to the digitization initiative that we are currently working on. Now, all of you would be aware that in emerging markets there is a large number of general trade outlets, often across many rural markets, far-flung locations. In the past, generating demand, capturing demand, and servicing that demand required a massive human machinery of salespeople, merchandisers, delivery vehicles. In the future, it need not be that way. Developments in technology, digitization, and new tools deployed through the ubiquitous mobile phone that exists now can enable us to generate and capture demand without a physical presence. That throws up enormous opportunities. We have three goals when it comes to this. First, we want to digitize every one of our stores and build a digital relationship with 100% of the stores that we service. The benefit of that is clear. That will enable us to understand their needs, drive better services, increase the assortment, drive convenience in these stores. And the third thing that we want to do is to expand our reach beyond the stores that we are getting, which we couldn't do thus far because of the economics of reach. But the reduced cost of reach as a result of digital should enable us to go to the next rung of outlets, which were hitherto not possible for us to do. Actions like this should enable us to not just protect our position, but potentially even strengthen the competitive advantage that we have here. Now, let me move on to the second lever that I wanted to talk about, which is channels. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Because in a hyper-fragmenting world that we find ourselves in, there is more and more growth that we are seeing in the new emerging channels than in the traditional channels like supermarkets and hypermarkets that we had. Yeah? However, addressing these channel opportunities is not so easy because many of these channels have unique characteristics and require special capabilities and often a special portfolio to address them. I want to give you an example of two channels to bring this to life. Let me first start with e-commerce as a channel. Now, even as I talk about e-commerce as a channel, I want all of us to recognize that e-commerce is not a single channel. It is several different models rolled into one. It is pure play, it could be omni-channel, it could be direct to consumer. Each one has slightly different requirements, but they share some common characteristics. Now, if you are to win in e-commerce, what does it mean for us? The first thing it means is that we have to understand the online demand space. People behave differently on e-commerce than when they might be in an out-of-home channel or when they would be in a health and beauty store. Research shows that the early adopters on e-commerce have a higher propensity to buy products which are more natural, better for me, better for the planet. They're seeking convenience. And they're also willing to pay a higher premium. That's the sort of opportunity that we need to be addressing. And the second thing that you need to do if you are to address the e-commerce opportunity is to make sure that on ratings and reviews on that platform, you score well. A minimum of 4 stars is required because that's the key driver of influence and choice making when it comes to e-commerce. The third aspect is that you have to design your products such that they're easy to be shipped. E-commerce ready packaging is crucial. That enables us to reduce the cost of logistics, as indeed the high value density that you require. A high value density simply means that the price of the product in relationship to the volume or the weight of the product. This is again crucial, often underestimated, without which the economics of distributing that product straight to a consumer's home never works out for the retailer, and therefore you never get the preference from them. The examples which you see there make a point. If you see the Sun dishwash tablets, in the box that it is designed in, that's a box that can go through your letterbox. Makes it easy for people to get into a subscription and easy for people to deliver it. Or the Cif box on the right-hand side which you see. The secondary packaging is already e-commerce ready. It does not require any other packaging for the e-commerce partner to send it to your home. These are just some examples of what you need to do to win in e-commerce. Let me share with you what it might require to win in health and beauty. A very different channel, but again getting plenty of growth. Now, why would you go to a health and beauty channel? Not to buy the same brands that you get in a hypermarket or a supermarket aisle. You go there because you have some very specialist needs. You're looking for higher-end beauty solutions. You're often looking for products which have clinically proven therapeutic products, etc. So therefore, you need to design a portfolio which would address that, sometimes needing dedicated brands. And if you wanted to take your regular brands in this channel, e.g. Vaseline, for example, surely you couldn't put your regular Vaseline range out here. Maybe a clinical care Vaseline range might be better suited for the health and beauty channel. But in addition, you also need a supply chain which recognizes that there will be many small niche offerings, that you have to deal with a high innovation cycle, and it has the capacity to be able to handle that. Just some examples of what it would take for us to win out here. Winning in different channels is a key priority for us and will be a focus area for us in the years to come. I'm going to quickly move on to the third theme that we spoke of, which is high growth segments. Now, none of this should be new for any of you. We've spoken of the key trends that we see at this point in time, and those remain unchanged. They're mega trends. Better for me and better for planet. Convenience, and people want anytime, anywhere solutions, and beauty and wellness. That's the basis on which we are driving our portfolio change. And every division is looking to see how it can leverage these trends and shift a larger proportion of its portfolio in these spaces. You see it with the acquisition of 7th Generation, which offers a green cleaning solution. But it's not just the acquisition. The rest of the home care business is seeing how it can become more green by driving concentration or replacing conventional ingredients with plant-based ingredients without compromising efficacy. Or new business models in foods like ice cream now, which enable a consumer to order ice cream whenever you wanted it. Beauty and wellness has been again a big theme. In fact, the largest shift in our portfolio transformation has happened as a result of that. Just 10 years ago, the beauty and personal care division was just about 28% of Unilever. Today it is 42% of Unilever, both a combination of organic initiatives and the acquisitions which we've had. But in addition to this, there is this dimension of wellness and nutrition which goes beyond the BPC category. The recent acquisition of Horlicks that we've had, which should get culminated before the end of the year, is again playing into this larger trend of wellness, health, and nutrition that we see. So that's an example of what we are doing in this area. Which now brings me to the last theme that I wanted to talk about, which was around purpose. Now, Kantar published a report recently. It's called the Purpose 2020 report. And the Purpose 2020 report essentially says the following, that brands which people see as making a positive difference to the world in which we live end up selling twice as much as others. They sell at 2 times the rate as the alternatives that we've got. That's the difference that we see on account of purpose. There are many other studies that we've got, studies which show how purpose-driven brands drive relevance. We understand that. But in a world that we are living in, which is highly social, where people are spending up to 2 hours a day on social media, purpose drives talkability. And that's why it's important for us to be driving purpose. But in addition to that, evidence shows that purpose drives preference. 2 studies that I can talk about. A study done amongst millennials which said that 90% of millennials said that they would switch a brand. They would switch a brand in favor of a brand which addressed social issues that they related with. And across the world, beyond millennials, 2/3 of consumers said the same thing, that they would choose a brand which stood for a purpose that they cared about. That's the difference that purpose makes. And that's why we feel that purpose will make a massive difference to us, driving relevance, driving talkability, driving penetration, and indeed reducing the elasticity for us. Now, while all of that is external evidence, the most compelling evidence that we have is from our own internal data. Many of you would have heard that we measure our sustainable living brands. We have been sharing the data on our sustainable living brands for a while. We have today 28 brands which are sustainable living brands. These 28 brands, some are new, some are old, some are big, some are small, some are homegrown, some are acquired. But these 28 brands grew 69% faster than the rest of our portfolio that we've got. That's why we want all our brands to deepen purpose and embed it such that we can step up growth and become more relevant to the world that we are living in. To summarize, all I want to say is the following. Oh, even before that, maybe the hot topic of plastics. How could I forget that? Now, we all know how serious this issue is. Now, we've made a commitment, and many of you would be aware of the commitment that we've made on plastics, which is that 100% of our portfolio will have recyclable, reusable, or compostable material, and that 25% use of recycled plastic in our portfolio, all by the year 2025. Towards that end, we are working with our partners, with retailers in the larger ecosystem, trying to drive for a more circular economy. But ourselves, we have a framework which we call the less plastics, better plastics, and a no plastic framework, which helps us address this. From 2010 till now, we have reduced the amount of plastic by about 18%. That's the reduction in plastic that we've had through better design, through lightweighting technologies that we've put in. The Better Plastic Initiative is simply making more of our plastic recyclable and reusing recycled material in it. The Love Beauty Planet and the Sunlight examples use 100% PCR in those products. And then, of course, there is this dream of finding solutions which are with no plastics. There are some early steps that we've got, like a toothbrush which doesn't use plastic but can be used using bamboo or wood. But these are early solutions and early thoughts. Much more needs to be done to craft solutions which could avoid plastics going forward. With that, let me quickly summarize. We had, like I talked about, there were 4 levers of growth: geographies, channels, high growth segments, and purpose. All of them have to be driven, but have to be driven with rigor, they have to be driven with discipline, they have to be driven with consistency. They have to be agile and quick, reallocating resources dynamically as required. All of this, along with the self-based approach, should help us step up growth. Finally, let me reiterate our investment case. Leading for purpose, in our view, is possibly more relevant today than ever before. We run a multi-stakeholder model with the consumer at the heart of our business. We deeply believe that this will make a difference to us. We want our customers, we want our communities, we want our employees to buy into our vision. We want our shareholders not just to be invested in Unilever, but to be invested in how we go about delivering our business. And finally, I want to say that all of this we are doing based on the deep conviction that a purpose-led business with a multi-stakeholder model will lead to superior financial returns and the long-term value creation that we all work towards. Thank you all for listening.
There's a microphone at the back.
Hello. What is your growth strategy for ice cream? Where does ice cream lives in your portfolio?
So ice cream is an exciting business for us. I talked about the out-of-home channel and the significant growth that we get in our out-of-home channel. I think ice cream leverages that very well. We get strong growth in ice cream across many markets in the emerging world. We are getting strong growth through the regular model that we've built around driving more consumption opportunities, up-trading people to more impulse occasions, etc. So ice cream is core to our business at this moment.
Okay, there's no more. We'll take the rest of the questions. Very much.
Thank you.